Welcome to the SRS Podcast. I'm your host, Aaron J. Babyar, and I'm the Training Director of Support Raising Solutions. Whether you're a new ministry worker or a veteran looking to increase your competence and confidence, Support Raising Solutions seeks to bless you in your quest to be a spiritually healthy, vision-driven, fully funded Great Commission worker. My guest today is Barbara Bowman. Barbara works with DickersonBakker, which is an organization that is focused on advancing nonprofits. And like so many of us, of course, Barb, you have been affected by the coronavirus or COVID-19 or whatever people want to call it. In my case, I was able to get home from Southeast Asia. It wasn't easy, but I've been here for almost 2 weeks, not quite at the time I'm recording. But Barb, you are from Idaho, but you're in New Jersey and you ended up staying in New Jersey. So you are hunkering down, I believe you said at your daughter and son-in-law's place in New Jersey. Is that correct?
Aaron, that's exactly correct. I had plans to come out, and I'm just going to brag for a minute, for the birth of my first grandchild, which is a grandson. Managed to get here managed to get here right when the corona pandemic was taking or getting a foothold here in New Jersey. And it hadn't been an edict yet that you had to stay home. But within a week of being here, that was the case. And as you know, it's been unfolding till now. There's travel restrictions. So my 2-week trip to come just shore up and help as grandma has turned into probably 6 weeks of being here. I think I've changed my return fare 3 times. And now I'm just giving up. I'm just going to wait till I know when it is safe to go back. But I have to say, if you're going to be stuck somewhere, every time I hold that beautiful new grandson, it sort of takes the worries of the world away for a moment or two.
Wow. What a blessing inside a very difficult time. I'm sure.
Yeah.
I'm sure your daughter and son-in-law don't mind having an extra pair of hands to change
They haven't been complaining, Aaron.
Oh, wow. Well, Barb, thank you so much for joining us. Tell us a little bit about yourself, because you've been in ministry and now you work with an organization that serves nonprofits. And to be quite honest, this is a great thing. You're pretty different from some of our recent guests in that way. Tell us a little bit more, please, about your history as well as what you do now before we jump into more of the topic today.
Absolutely. Aaron, are you trying to tell me I'm an odd duck?
You're an odd duck, and that's a wonderful thing.
Well, to back up a bit, interestingly, my husband and I have raised personal support for our entire married life, which our anniversary is this week, and it's 40 years.
Wow. Congratulations.
My husband, thank you. My husband has been on Young Life staff for 44 years. And so I know nothing but the faith journey of raising personal support. In fact, we are not pooled. So if the money doesn't come in, you don't get paid at the same level. Right. So we've had many difficult conversations. But I most recently was Chief Advancement Officer for a global missions organization, Mission Aviation Fellowship. Awesome. As Chief Advancement Officer, I oversaw really all institutional fundraising, but the personal support raising department was under my leadership as well. Right. And that had been a shift and had sat under finance for most of its existence. And then they moved it so it could sit closer to organizational fundraising. So really, we could share ideas back and forth because there's a lot more similarities, I think, than people realize. After 10 years of being Chief Advancement Officer, I really knew at this point in my career, God was calling me to really deploy my personal call to mission differently, which is enabling organizations to really grow to the next level of capacity building. And so I left last year to go to work with DickersonBakker full-time as a senior consultant, helping organizations truly move to the next level with their people or
Mhm.
their systems or their fundraising. So I
Well,
do bring a
you
unique
are that's where I
perspective.
say you're an odd duck in all of
Yeah.
this because and a good odd duck. Again, we like ducks, but from the standpoint of you're both someone who thinks about, has lived and worked in from a very personal part of raising support, which that's most of our listeners are people that raise and live on
Mm-hmm.
personal support, not all, but most. But also, you walk in the organizational shoes of thinking about development and organizational ministry budgets, and so we have a lot of people, Barb, that listen to this that they raise all of their personal support, and some of them they raise a fair amount of their organizational support as well. And so, in
Yeah.
a lot of ways, I'm really excited to even have you join us today because you have had both of your feet so firmly planted on the organizational and the personal side, and you already said it yourself. There are a lot of similarities. Yes, there's differences, but there are a lot
Mm-hmm.
of similarities, and so I just think you're the perfect voice to join us in this time. So I realize we haven't even said that much yet, but thank you again for being on the podcast. I'm
Yeah.
excited to have you here.
Well, it's exciting. And my prayer has just been that there could be a nugget or two that God could use in our listeners' lives and be an encouragement to them.
Yeah, yeah. Well, so now coronavirus is obviously it's the current reality, and it's affecting a lot of people. And by affecting a lot of people, of course, we mean that in a very sobering way, as far as health wise. And there's a lot of opportunity to pray and love on and minister to people that are directly affected by this terrible virus. But the point of this podcast is often to talk about support raising and finances, and so in no way, shape, or form are we wanting or meaning to be insensitive to a very real issue that's affecting people, and so we don't want to come off as callous and go, well, let's just talk about the money, because obviously
Mm.
there's a lot going on. And God is so much at work. He is on his throne. The Great Commission is being advanced and forwarded. But within that, we do need to talk about finances. And so, from that standpoint, Barbara, obviously you and I can talk about this a lot of different ways. But I just want to kind of give you the mic here for a few minutes and have you start digging around on this idea of how does this coronavirus, how does this crisis impact people's personal fundraising plans?
Hmm. Absolutely. I was I was thinking yesterday and just pondering, partially because there was an earthquake in Boise, Idaho, where is my home state. And so I was thinking about the pandemic and then this earthquake. And I was thinking about how so often in biblical history, there was some kind of shaking that was going on that was really, in the end, was an invitation for Jesus' followers to return to being faithful, to return to putting God on the throne. Then I was thinking about that same concept, how it applies to fundraising. And I think it does. I think we are being called back to understanding fundraising and its theological basis and the ministry that it is in and of itself. There is something about the community of supporters, as we might be workers on the front line, that is the church. It represents a church. It's not just us out there. We are really an extension of our support team. And I think the church is being called to relate to each other, to care for each other, to communicate in ways that sort of return us to the true meaning of the church. And I think that's exciting. It sounds like I zoomed out really far, which I did, but I think we have to start there in understanding, because I think in times of crisis, we feel self-conscious about maybe communicating or turning back to our donors. Like, they have enough going on in their own life. How could they possibly want me to interrupt them right now? But I think when we stop and go, no, this support team And I'm part of that. And we are the church, and we have a renewed call to care for each other in the midst of this. It's kind of beautiful. It isn't kind of, it is.
It
And I
is.
think
Yeah.
it's returning to something more authentic and true of the church.
Good, good, good. Barb, I really am listening to everything you're saying. However, while you were speaking, I have a side window up on my monitors, and an email came in from a supporter. I just glanced at it ever so briefly off to the side. So like I said, I really was listening, but it was interesting because he was saying what you were saying.
Wow. Wow.
And that's why it really captured my attention. And he's an elder at a very significant church that really preaches the gospel and does some incredible things for the glory of God. And he also happens to be on my support team. And it was one of those things where, he was echoing a lot of exactly what you just said. This is the time for us to be the church, and you're not more or less part of the quote unquote church if you're on the field in a country different from the one you grew up on, or if you serve in some sort of ministry that's outside of a local church in the United States. If you're a part of the Great Commission, you are the church, and
That's right.
this is our time.
And I think, too, as you're serving in the context of your mission field or one's mission field, they have this amazing gift to offer their supporter in that might be in the U.S. context, because this is a global pandemic, right? And I think that U.S. Christians and Western Christians need to be informed. It's a blessing to be informed of the global context. And like never before, we are sharing something globally. We're all in this together. And so, whether it's a family serving in Indonesia, or maybe they're in Vietnam, or wherever they might be, what an amazing opportunity to share life together in the unity of this challenge.
So true. So true. Good stuff. So as we're in this, obviously it's a challenging time from a lot of different ways. Let's zoom in a bit on what you've been able to learn over the years, maybe even going back to other sharp economic downturns in the past in history, and knowing what you know about personal support raising, even organizational development. What are some lessons that we can learn from history, or even ideas to begin to consider in a time such as this, Barb?
As we are relating to our current donors, whether it's on the organizational side or personal support raising team, I think the important thing to do is think about it strategically. On the org side, we often think of donors and we might segment them. We might go, these are our major donors, maybe mid-level. These are our faithful monthly supporters. But on the lower end, that very same thing can be done with your personal support raising team. So maybe you have 300 to 400 personal supporters. Look at them and segment them. Say, who are the 20% of the people that are giving 80% of my personal support? And maybe prioritize them. Think about how you might relate to them differently than you might someone who's your recurring donor at $25 a month. Of those 20% that give 80% of your personal support, then take a look and maybe consider who might be really struggling right now, who might be the business owners who are barely making payroll. But then likely within that 20%, there are some who are benefiting from the pandemic we're involved in. They could be manufacturers, they could be pharmaceutical folks, it could be people with Amazon, who knows exactly.
Yeah.
But
We've
to
joked on a
create
couple
it,
of the podcasts. If you have somebody who supports you who works for Charmin, this might be the
this
time
might be
to
a
reach
good time, right? But in that, create a customized relationship strategy with your different segments, because it can be very different. what you might say or how you might reach out to someone you know truly is suffering because they're a small business owner. You would want to lead with truly touching in with them and seeing how they're doing, offering to pray, that kind of thing. But with someone who might actually be benefiting, it might be the time to ask for an extra gift
Yeah.
that could benefit. Honestly, they're probably, I hate to say this, feeling a little guilt or maybe just a little overwhelmed with
Right.
the fact that they could be benefiting.
Right.
Uh,
And there is two
and
sides to
so,
that coin.
yeah.
I really want to affirm that, by the way. In fact, I'll just double down on what you just said, Barb, because yeah, it might actually be a time to be strategic with somebody that's doing great and say, hey, thank you for your
Mm-hmm.
partnership. This virus and economic thing it's changing stuff for us. If you have if you have the means, would you consider increasing your normal support from X to Y? Like you could have that conversation and not do it in a pushy way at all. But the other side of that coin, and I'm glad you led with that first, is yeah, you might have some people who are really hurting. And in fact,
Mm-hmm.
I do have I'm thinking of one couple right now that are my partners in ministry that God has continually laid them on my heart, Barb. And I know they are small business owners and it's not going well for them, on top of the fact that they're feeling some pretty strong feels because they had to at least temporarily let several of their employees go because there's no money coming in. And
Yeah.
I don't think they fired anybody, but they had to. Oh, there's a term I forget what it is at this moment. Perhaps you remember, but they had to, basically temporarily pause their work. But now they're feeling like, man, we're not able to pay these people that work for us that we love, that we've also been trying to share the gospel with, and we're not able to help them feed their families in this terrible
Mm-hmm.
time. And so they're walking in it. And so I haven't just like texted them once. Like in
Mm-hmm.
actually praying for them, Barb, I've actually felt very led to engage with them a few times and, and
Yeah.
just go, hey, I'm still praying for you guys. You are not forgotten in a time such as this. And so
Mm-hmm.
there really is, there's more than just one way to respond to this. We don't want to just go after the people that are doing great financially right now, although that might be strategically wise. We also want to really pastorally love on those who obviously aren't doing so good. So you said it. I just wanted to reaffirm it, Barb. You are so
Yeah.
right on with that.
Yeah. The other thing, too, I think with that segment that could be hurting beyond connecting with them for prayer is link them to resources, link them to content. I'll give you an example. One of our personal support raisers or support members of our team personally is a small business owner. And I had a great document come across email that was really, it just in a great way outlined the CARES Act and how to navigate accessing the money, which in each state is very different. I was able to pass that on to the donor and just said, I know you're under a lot of stress. You're trying to figure things out. I thought this document might be helpful to you and save you some minutes of research on your own.
Very
In
cool. Very
fact,
practical.
here's a link to it. So that's just one example. Maybe there's a great devotion that comes across
Mm-hmm.
even your email, even though you're living in another culture, another context, that would be easy to pass on.
Mm-hmm.
Another idea that I just talked to my husband about is let's plan a prayer hour for our support team. Even if only 20% can participate, what if we sent out a Zoom, invited them on an evening next week to come together as a support team with the goal of supporting each other and praying together? And I think that's a fantastic idea. What I like about it is there's a bit of peer interaction from one support family to another.
Mm-hmm.
And there might be some great outcomes from just networking and being in the same space together.
Yeah. Yeah. Very cool. Very cool. Well, keep going because you seem to be a wealth of information here. What are some other ideas to consider or to engage with in this time?
Mm-hmm.
You seem to have some great ideas.
One one recommendation I have, and what it's based on, it's very common for a support team members to be worried that the organization or the umbrella organization of their missionary family is in trouble.
Mm-hmm.
It's very, very common. And I've seen that happen. This even happens when there's a target increase, right?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the families that are on the support team just have a lot of questions. They're concerned. Would my missionary family lose their jobs if they don't reach the target? I think it's true in the context today. And I would recommend having the president, CEO, or executive director of your either sending agency or your umbrella organization prepare a letter that you could send out to your mission support team that is kind of a state of the union in terms of your organization, and assure your donors that this is how the organization's responding, that if they can say it, that they don't intend not to be able to cover payroll, or that they don't intend or don't anticipate that they'll be shrinking in their mission team, and then giving some very specific things they're doing to protect their people on the field
Mm-hmm.
in the context of the pandemic. I think that would be extremely valuable if your organization has the capability of even doing a few media clips by the president and CEO or executive director
Right.
that you could embed in an email or have a link, all the better.
Right. Right. Good stuff. Good stuff. And I know that a lot of us are getting, I've gotten emails from, Taco Bell, from a lot of
Mm-hmm.
people like, this is how we're doing it. And yet, if something as non-urgent, I'm sorry, I don't mean to put down tacos, but if something is non-urgent as Taco Bell is doing a brief State of the Union, hopefully your missions organization that you're working with is doing a brief State of the Union as well. You're on the front lines. You're doing some pretty incredible stuff, and people are investing. They might not say it, but many might expect, and they might, if you haven't already sent something, they might be waiting to hear something more organizational and specific, right?
Mm-hmm. I'm sitting here chuckling a little bit because yesterday, one of the mission families for Mission Aviation Fellowship sent a picture through Facebook of their grocery store that was incredibly stocked with toilet paper, right? And in jest, they said, if you need any toilet paper, you can find it here. I think it was Indonesia, maybe. But I laughed. I thought, wouldn't that be fun to send out to all their donors?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
This picture of overstocked toilet paper and just say, I would do anything if I could ship this to you or send this to you. This is where my heart's at, as I understand there's a shortage of toilet paper
Yeah.
in your community.
Yeah. Yeah. Good one. Good one. Yeah. That's being mindful, being aware, being well, I guess whatever the opposite of tone deaf is, tone on
Mm-hmm.
tone, with understanding where people are at and what they're thinking about. That's important. And if you can communicate along those lines, that helps your we'll call your supporters your audience. That helps your audience
Mm-hmm.
engage
Mm-hmm.
and communicate
Mm-hmm.
with you. So talk a little bit more about that, the tone and the sentiments idea. What sort of advice can you give us about that, Barb?
Yes. Obviously, I think everyone needs to be super sensitive to their tone. It's a very it's a very serious time, if that makes sense, in the world today, and I think our tone needs to reflect that. I do think there is space for some joy, so don't get me wrong. I mean, the toilet paper suggestion is fun, and I think levity can be helpful right now. But I do believe it's a time of authenticity and transparency with our donors. I even think that's true if there ends up being donors that drop off or a gap exists. I think there is a time and place to be honest about that in the right way. I think it's also a time where, with the right tone and sentiment, a theme could be construed You talked about this earlier, stand in the gap. That's a great theme to use in some ways, because right now we as Christians need to stand in the gap. We're calling on God to stand in the gap, and they are standing in the gap in terms of your ministry support. There's other themes that could be used as well. Mm-hmm. I do think having a sentiment of collectiveness, of collecting all of people in the same space. I think it's easy in particularly support raising mission families that are serving overseas to sort of have this dichotomy of we're over here and we're on the front line, you're there supporting us, as opposed to we are all the same body,
right?
Literally, and one might be the arm and one might be the foot. It's the mutuality of that is really important right now, because of mutual suffering that could be going on.
Right. Good stuff. Well, Barbara, as we move towards the end of the podcast today, I want to just invite you to kind of have a final word of wisdom, or maybe there was something you wanted to say that you didn't have a chance to say yet, but just want to kind of give you the podium one more time and kind of wrap us up, so to speak, with final words of wisdom.
Mm-hmm. I think right now that God is using this global pandemic to put a pause in many of our lives. We live at a very frenetic pace, even when it comes to fundraising, whether it's personal support raising or organizational. There's hardly a breath that sometimes happens with it. And I would encourage everyone to think about how that pause can create space for the Holy Spirit to work as you are personally support raising. What does a pause look like in the way you're actually relating to your personal support team? It's not easy to do many, many thousands of miles apart. But what does that look like to encourage that, to leave space for authentic relationships, to leave space to find out how people are really doing and have a two-way exchange around that, to give space to people who can't continue at the same level right now, but could return to that, and giving them the release, the blessed release, if that's what needs to happen.
Yeah.
To give space to challenge maybe donors who can increase their giving and have a pause so the Holy Spirit can work in their lives and speak to them.
Wonderful stuff. Well, Barbara, thank you so much for joining us on the SRS podcast. It's been a joy to have you share your wisdom in this unique time. And God bless you, my friend. And I kind of wish you well, so to speak, in getting back to Idaho soon. Maybe not too soon. I think you got grandbaby boy on there. So congratulations on that again, and your upcoming anniversary. And thank you for taking the time out of your schedule to share with us here on the SRS podcast.
Absolutely. It's been a privilege, and I'm in it with you all who are listening, and my prayers are with you as well. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us for this episode. We would love to hear your ideas for future content. Please visit supportraisingsolutions.org/feedback to share your thoughts and questions. Also, wherever you download your podcast from, be sure to subscribe for future episodes and come back each week to gain more insight into the process of building and maintaining your personal support team.